I was sitting on my bed terrified. I felt intense fear of my husband, and now the time for his return was fast approaching. Every night when he came back he treated me horribly. At times his behavior would leave me in such a bad state that I felt like I couldn't breathe, but he never showed any mercy. Even now the events of last night replayed in my mind, leaving me trembling with fear. I kept glancing at the door, knowing he would walk through at any moment now. Suddenly I heard the main door creak open, followed by the sound of my husband's voice. It was clear that he had entered the house at the same time my mother-in-law came into my room. She gave me strange looks that sent a chill down my spine. She came closer, grabbed me by the hair and demanded, "What spell have you cast on my son that he only ever talks about you?" The pain from her pulling my hair was unbearable. I tried to free myself, but the old woman was surprisingly strong. My body was already aching from last night's ordeal, and now her abuse was too much to handle. I broke down into sobs. Suddenly the door burst open and my husband entered the room in a hurry. He grabbed his mother's hand and roughly pushed her away. He turned to me, his tone soft, and asked, "What's wrong? Are you okay?" Meanwhile his mother glared at me furiously and then at him. I couldn't understand what they wanted from me. After a moment he turned to his mother and said angrily, "But Mom, get out of my room right now. This is my time to spend with my wife, not to deal with your nonsense." He was speaking to her in a harsh tone that even I found unsettling, but I couldn't say anything for fear of provoking him further. After a short while my mother-in-law left, muttering curses and posto that I couldn't understand. However, I knew she was extremely angry, and I was sure she would take it out on me the next day. Now that I had dealt with my mother-in-law, it was my husband's turn. I didn't like my mother-in-law's anger or my husband's affection. Both were too extreme. When love and hatred become extreme, a person faces great difficulty. Now he was looking at me with a strange glint in his eye. It was this glint that frightened me. He took my hand and said, "Wait here for me. I'm going to take a shower." With that he quickly headed to the bathroom. I turned to my God, praying fervently for release from this cruel man, because I didn't have the strength to endure his brutality any longer. A little while later he came out of the bathroom, still smiling at me. He suddenly asked where the rope was kept. My heart started racing and tears welled up in my eyes. Seeing me cry, he gently wiped my tears and said, "There's no need to cry. Don't worry, I won't hurt you tonight. In fact, tonight I'm only going to show you love." He then mentioned that he had watched a video yesterday and had been thinking about something, but he trailed off, suddenly pulling out his phone to play the video. My entire body began trembling with fear. This was what he always did, and it always ended in my suffering. Soon he played the video in front of me, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. I shook my head desperately. Meanwhile he kept smiling and said, "Who wouldn't value such a sweet, innocent wife?" But the value he spoke of was nothing short of cruelty, something he inflicted every day. I had had enough. I was still very young and couldn't speak out against him. I wasn't even allowed to leave the house. I was living in a small village near Peshawar, a place I knew nothing about. All I knew was that my father had sold me into this household, and I was destined to spend my life here. Everything that happened to me had to remain a secret. If I tried to tell anyone, the consequences would be even worse. Now he was searching the room for the rope. I had hidden it in the top drawer and prayed he wouldn't find it. When he couldn't locate it, he came at me in anger and slapped me hard across the face. I wasn't prepared for it at all. I fell onto the bed sobbing uncontrollably. He grabbed my arm and yanked me up furiously, demanding, "Tell me where you hid that rope or I'll bury you alive right now." He had turned into a wild beast. Seeing him like this made me even more terrified. Through my tears I stammered, "I don't know where the rope is. When I woke up this morning it wasn't here." Hearing my words, he started pulling at his hair in frustration, shouting, "I know you're doing this on purpose. Just wait and see what I'll do to you now." Before he could hurt me again, there was a knock on the door. The sound startled me, and I looked toward the door, praying for some kind of escape from this man. A short while later he went to answer the door. Standing there was my mother-in-law. Before she could say anything he asked, "Mom, is there a rope somewhere in the house?" My mother-in-law looked shocked and asked him why he needed a rope at this hour. He snapped, "Don't ask me these questions and don't make me more frustrated. Just answer my question. Is there a rope in the house?" She shook her head quickly and said, "I don't have one, but I saw a rope in the drawer of that room earlier today." Hearing my mother-in-law's words, felt as if all seven heavens had collapsed over my head. She had no idea how much trouble she had just caused me. My husband turned and glanced at me. My heart began pounding and I could barely remain standing. I tried to avoid his gaze, but I knew I couldn't do so for long. Which drawer did you see the rope in, Mom? Just get it for me quickly, he demanded, but instead of answering she kept asking him, first tell me what you're going to do with that rope. He cast a quick glance at me and then said, I'm going to tie her up and beat her. Hearing this, my mother-in-law smiled. She patted her son affectionately and said, I was sure my son wouldn't tolerate his mother being disrespected. You're taking revenge for her rudeness from earlier, aren't you? She asked him. My husband nodded quickly. Then my mother-in-law took the rope from the top drawer and handed it to him. Now with the rope in his hand, he was staring at me with ravenous eyes. A short while later, my mother-in-law left the room, whispering to me as she walked out, I know what your husband does to you and I'm glad about it. In fact, I'd like to watch it all myself. With that, she left the room. Now my husband turned his attention to me as he approached step by step. I felt as though the life was draining out of me. He stopped a few steps away, then just like before, he tied my hands. Before he could make any further move, his phone rang. Seeing the call, he became furious. He quickly picked it up and angrily scolded the person on the other end, saying, I'm busy with my wife right now. Don't bother me. But mid-conversation he suddenly fell silent, his expression turning to fear. For the first time I saw him scared. Despite myself, I grew worried and asked him what happened, but he didn't answer me and dashed out of the room. I lay there helpless, not knowing what to do. I feared that if my mother-in-law entered the room now, I'd have no dignity left. That was what frightened me the most. But fortunately, my husband returned to the room a few minutes later. When he saw me still lying there, he rushed over and said, why are you still lying like this? I replied, I'll get up once you untie me. He said, I need to leave right away. A big problem has come up. I'm sorry. I promise I won't do this again tomorrow. Hearing this, I put on a sad face, but inside I was silently thanking God that I was finally getting a reprieve from him. There was nothing that made me happier than that. A short while later, he left the room. After he left, my mother-in-law came in and accused me. You've put some spell on my son, haven't you? That's why he's facing such a big problem now. I already knew you were a witch. Before she could hit me, I grabbed her hand. Even I was surprised by my own courage. After all, I was only 18 years old, but in these 18 years I had learned a lot about life. One thing I now understood clearly was that as long as I endured the abuse in silence, it would continue. I had to stand up to it. I couldn't take her violence anymore. I warned her I didn't cast any spell on him, but I swear if you ever try to hit me again, I'll tell him everything. You know how much he loves me. He already argued with you because of me. If he leaves this house tomorrow, think about what will happen. Hearing this, her face turned pale and she looked very frightened. For the first time in my life, I felt a sense of satisfaction seeing her like this. I thought about how I had endured her abuse for 8 months. If I had spoken up 8 months ago, perhaps things would have been different today. But everything happens in its own time, and when done at the right moment, it yields better results. She turned away and said, I'll make sure to settle this score with you. I didn't pay much attention to her threat and went back to my room. I was completely exhausted from all the work I had done that day. My entire body ached, and I just wanted to sleep. That night I slept peacefully. The next morning I woke up to loud noises coming from the courtyard. Worried, I went outside to see my mother-in-law creating a scene. She was crying loudly, beating her chest. Seeing her like that, I had a terrible feeling something had gone very wrong. I quickly went over to her and asked, what happened? Why are you making such a commotion? She looked at me angrily and said, because of you my son was taken away by the police. Her words made me feel as though the ground beneath me had vanished. I hadn't expected to face such a situation. I asked her why the police had taken him. She replied, because he paid you money to marry him. He paid you. After saying this, she began crying again. I still couldn't quite understand what she meant. For one thing, her Urdu was broken, and on top of that she spoke with a heavy Pashtun accent which made her hard to understand. Just then the front door opened and a woman walked in. Seeing me, she quickly came over. She was the most educated woman in the area, and she had been married here just a few months ago. Like me, she had also been dealt a bad hand by fate. She took my arm and led me into the room. As we went inside, I could hear my mother-in-law shouting behind us, I know you two are behind all of this. You both think you're so smart and well educated, but I'm telling you, I'll make you pay For this. We ignored her threats and quickly locked ourselves in the room. I asked the woman, what's going on? What is my mother-in-law talking about? Nimra's face lit up with joy as she held my hand and said, I'm so happy for you. Surprised, I asked her what had happened, and she replied, your cousin, who has always loved you, did something huge today. That's why you should be grateful. I was just 18 and the very concept of love was foreign to me. All I understood were the grim realities of marriage and the pain of abuse. I asked her to clarify which cousin she was talking about. That's when she mentioned Imran and explained that he had brought the police over, claiming that I had been forced into marriage. Not only that, but he also demanded that I leave with him, resulting in my husband being locked up behind bars. She laughed in delight, but I felt like the sky had collapsed on me. Yes, my husband had treated me terribly. He abused me, insulted me, and made my life miserable, but never did I wish for something so extreme to happen to him. I didn't want him to suffer so terribly. On my account, my expression of sadness worried Nimra. She asked why I didn't look happy. I told her that I wasn't happy, and she stared at me in disbelief. You always said you were tired of this hell, she insisted. You wanted a way out, and now that Allah is helping you, why are you so ungrateful? Get out of this hell. This is your chance, otherwise you'll spend your life suffering under your husband's cruelty. But I couldn't find solace in her words. I dropped my head into my hands. I had been raised to believe that once a woman is married, she must spend her entire life with her husband. Divorce wasn't even an option. And if a woman did get divorced, her life would become meaningless, reduced to nothing but disgrace. These ingrained beliefs left me deeply troubled. What would I do if I got divorced? Where would I go? My parents had already sold me off, proving how little they cared for my well-being. They had left me no way back, and I didn't even want to return to them. Yet I also knew that if I divorced my husband, he wouldn't let it go. He would come after me, and I feared for my family's safety. For that reason, I wanted to end this matter here and now. But Nimra was adamant. She kept pushing me to take the opportunity to leave. She said, just tell the police that you were forced into this marriage. That's all you need to do. I looked at her helplessly and asked, if you were in my place, would you leave your husband? She fell silent for a moment before answering, my situation is different from yours. My husband loves me, and my mother-in-law respects me. Hearing that, I couldn't help but smile, because I knew it wasn't true. Just a few months ago, she had confided in me about the abuse she endured at the hands of her husband. Now she was contradicting her own words. People are quick to offer advice to others, but when it comes to following that same advice themselves, they hesitate and search for alternatives. They try to find a way to solve their problems without making the difficult choices they suggest for others. After attempting to convince me, Nimra eventually left. I sat down beside my mother-in-law, who took my hands and pleaded, please have mercy on my son. He's a bit erratic, but he loves you very much. I tried to comfort her and reassured her, saying, you don't need to worry. I won't cause any harm to your son. As for my cousin, you can relax. I won't go with him. A short while later, my cousin entered the house with the police. The moment my mother-in-law saw him, I felt as though the sky had come crashing down on me. And this was the same man who had once tried to force himself on my cousin, and his reputation had spread far and wide because of it. No one dared stand up to him because he was wealthy and powerful. I knew exactly why he had come, and I wasn't naive enough not to recognize his intentions from the very first glance he cast my way. I understood just how vile he was. The police approached me, and my mother-in-law quickly adjusted her scarf and tried to cover her face. She gestured at me, but I was solely focused on one thing: protecting my husband. The police asked, child, were you forced into this marriage? Without hesitation, I shook my head. I may have been just 18, but circumstances had matured me beyond my years. I knew what I needed to say. This man was trying to settle a grudge with my husband by using me against him. I also understood that the police would never tarnish the reputation of their region, and I knew my husband's influence would ensure that any statements I made against him would be suppressed. I wasn't foolish enough to go against him. After my refusal, the police left. My mother-in-law hugged me tightly. I hadn't done it for her or her son. I had done it for myself. That evening, when my husband was released, he came